Oh, it looks like Jane has joined as an attendee, which means she's on mute.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right, couple of things just to get started. Chris Hager is traveling right now, and he is going to try to join us by phone in his vehicle. He's driving back from the East Coast, and I believe Tim Davis is going to have to leave early. So we'll leaving for what sounds like a really exciting thing, Tim, and I'm going to ask you to bring that up when we go around what you're going to be attending here in the next hour or so. But it's 10 o'clock and it looks like we got most everybody here. We got I think an exciting agenda today, some really cool stuff to discuss. I've missed seeing you all. I'm glad we're meeting again, and let's call this meeting to order. To start, it's been a while, so I think it's really would be good to get caught up, see what everybody's been up to in this interesting times we're living in. Mark Stern, why don't you tell us what you've been doing?
Yeah, hi everybody. Nice to see everybody this morning. Kind of more of the same. I mean, the one hand, tracking all the national events is hard to, it's sort of the world we're in right now. So that's been what it's been. More locally, we just continue to be outside a lot. We were at the coast on Wednesday, which was a little bit of a bluebird day, at least in Western Oregon, and took in some of the bays and the rivers, looking for birds, looking for whatever else was around, and just enjoying being outdoors. And we've also taken in some of the snow in Central Oregon for hiking and cross-country skiing and that sort of thing. So laying low, hoping at some point, vaccines come our way, but I hope they come everybody's way soon enough.
Yeah, man, me too. Mark has really been working hard behind the scenes, you guys. He's really made some great progress for us. We'll talk a little bit about that later. He's been instrumental in getting significant donations for some of our projects. Really exciting stuff. So thanks for that, Mark. Davia, how are you doing?
Morning, everybody. I'm doing all right, similar to what Mark said. Although kind of the reverse of what Mark said, my husband and I have barely left our neighborhood for the last 3 months because our dog does not travel well by car. So we've been really getting to know our neighborhood and working on our car training. So eventually we can go somewhere. We've had a sharp-shinned hawk that has been just having a feast on pine siskins on somebody's feeder down the street. And so we've somewhat adapted her. And she's the first ever sharp-chinned hawk that I've been confident is not a Cooper's hawk. So that's been fun to really get to know this individual bird. On the COVID front, my parents are both retired, but my dad was a firefighter and my mom worked at a hospital, and they continue to volunteer in those capacities. So my dad got his vaccine and my mom's gonna likely get it soon. So we might see them, which is really, very exciting. And then on the work front, I've been involved a lot in ODFW's fire response, thinking about the long-term view of the landscape and how we want recovery to go from a fish and wildlife perspective. And been really interesting. One of the biggest issues is down large woody debris. And a lot of folks are aware that that's been a really high priority for fish habitat restoration is getting more woody debris in stream. And so that's kind of a silver lining of the fires a lot of loss for humans, but some really good potential for fish habitat. And it turns out some FEMA rules require all that woody debris to be removed. and so trying to navigate the human safety and the fish habitat recovery has been a big learning experience for me. So that's what I've been up to.
Davia, I didn't realize you were doing that extra work. Let me tell you that Davia has been working like crazy on the OCRF stuff. And I'm calling her all the time and asking her to do more. And I don't know how she's getting it done. And then I didn't know she had these other responsibilities as well. So Davia, thank you for your incredible work. I really appreciate it. So Tim, why don't you tell us what's up and then tell us what you're going to be doing later today.
Yeah, so on the eastern Oregon front of Oregon, COVID's still going. No real big update there. For my own personal, just balancing school, kids, and next week they're going to start back to in-person, which is it's going to create some huge headaches there. Anyways, my organization's moving into an office, so that's been fun logistically. So that's why there's kind of an echo in the background. And just getting out on the land a lot still. We're just starting to get our season ramped up, getting trips organized. So yeah. And then what I'm doing later, when I'm getting off, is Senator Wyden has a virtual town hall for Malheur County. And something that I think that everybody on this call should be aware of is that I think it was Wednesday, he introduced the River Democracies Act or bill. And essentially it's for 4,700 miles of new wild and scenic river in Oregon. Yeah.
Wow, man, that's awesome. That's good news. Go give them some support and tell them how great that is. And let me say, your background scene is like making me crazy to go to Eastern Oregon. It's a great background scene.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
Hey, Mark Labhart, what's going on?
Good morning, Carl. Before I get started, I had a chance to look over the draft annual report. Well done, Davia. That's very impressive work. I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but I just wanted to, my immediate reaction was, wow. So, and as Mark Stern said, I'm enjoying the snow too. I'm not a skier, but I sure like to see all this moisture in Central Oregon to keep our rivers and lakes with hopefully some average, at least average rainfall this year or moisture into the things. I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but pretty excited about the reintroduction of the Renewable for America's Wildlife Act in Congress this time. And I think with the Congress that's seated now, we might get some traction on getting that. And that has the potential, I think, of giving about $40+ million to the department to implement the conservation strategy, which is absolutely huge and a huge benefit. On a personal note, I think Carl and Davia know this, but I had a pretty rough December and January. I had prostate cancer surgery, survived that, and it's what they call a zero now. And for once, zero is a pretty good number to have. And then I had back surgery, about a 4-hour back surgery, spinal stenosis. So I've gone through 2 pretty significant surgeries, and I came out on the positive end. So I'm kind of looking forward to 2021 to be a lot better than a lot of us have had for 2020. So thanks.
Mark, you look great. I will say I personally did not know about the prostate surgery. And I know throughout that whole time, you were still participating. You were showing up at meetings and at the commission and looking just great the whole time. So you pulled it off.
Pulled it off.
Pretty impressive. Hey, Murat, how are you doing?
Hello, everybody. I'm fine. I'm like everybody else, just trying to stay on an even keel. And that's been pretty hard over the last couple months. we walk a lot in the local pine forests. We climb little cinder buttes nearby, just trying to get out every day and get some air and fresh sunshine. And I've been working with a local group that's helping us implement the Wild and Scenic River Plan for Whitechoose that I was the team leader for. And I've been writing an article for them to help recruit new volunteers. We have sort of community stewardship goal there, trying to get more of the community involved in watching over things. And the trails have been so popular this last year that it's made me nervous about how many people are out there and what they're doing. So it's nice to know that there's somebody keeping a little bit of a watch on it, because the Forest Service is not there. Most of them are working from home and have been for almost a year now. So they're not getting out on the ground at all, and that's worrisome. And then in my other life as a yoga teacher, I've been exploring the nexus of poetry and yoga. So I've done a couple of special sessions on yoga and like restorative yoga with poetry, and I'm getting ready for my next one for Valentine's Day called the Love Poetry Meltdown, where I'm doing unconventional love poetry with restorative yoga. So just trying to keep sane and on an even keel. Thanks.
Wow, Murat, that sounds really interesting. I may have to figure out how to participate in that.
I'm happy to send you a link.
Send me a link.
All right.
Sounds really cool. I see that Chris Hager is on. Let's just see if that's working. Chris, are you with us?
Yeah, Carl, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yeah, really good.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. I'm excited to see everybody's familiar faces. I apologize for not having my camera on. I'm currently making a trip across country right now. I was just on the East Coast for a little bit. I had a opportunity to go see some family members and, celebrate some vaccinations on my elderly side of my family. So that was really great. And then at the same time, kind of picked up a car and I'm driving back. And so it's going to be an interesting next few days getting back to Portland. But in terms of the new year, just been extremely busy with work, with my day job with Northwest Steelheaders, just following the legislative session, a number of bills that we're interested in, as well as a lot of new movement on one of our big campaigns for the removal of the 4 lower Snake River dams. And so we've had a lot of great traction, a lot of good, one really great event that we had last week that we've been really excited about and partnered with the National Wildlife Federation. And so that's been a ton of fun. So yeah, and then I guess on the personal front, just, echoing everybody else's sentiments on trying to get out as much as I can, getting fresh air and not getting stir crazy at the exact same time. So yeah.
Well, Chris, I'm really glad you can join us, and thanks for making the effort to connect while you're traveling. We appreciate that. Hey, Mauricio, what's going on in your life?
Thank you, Carl. It's really interesting. Every time the question is asked, I look back and think I can't tell whether it's been a day or a week or a month. Time seems to be like such a variable nowadays, and so try to imagine highlights of what has happened since last we saw each other. But what's obvious and cannot be ignored is all the things that are happening, from a historical perspective, and what I keep being reminded of is just the resilience of the human spirit. Like, I see you guys here. I see what Mark has just shared with me, which is like, and he looks better than I ever will. And and then Jane, that beautiful haircut. I don't know if it's new, but it's good to see. It looks wonderful. Same as Murat and everybody. So I think it just there's a sense of hope and purpose on the work that we do. I've also have had the opportunity to participate in a lot of really interesting, beautiful things. I will be designing the Harney County Migratory Bird Festival, virtual bird festival this year. And we settled on a choose your own adventure. Remember the book series from the 80s, Choose Your Own Adventure? We're going to do a story map based on that. And that has taken a lot of my, inspiration in the last few days. And it's just just feeling like there's an air of change, and I'm trying to take it in as much as I can. And I see everything that has happened. Now, it seems like unexpected is the new normal. You never know what next week is going to bring, but somehow we managed to stay afloat and figure out new ways to be better together. So that has been sort of the theme for me in the last month since I saw you guys. So good to see you.
Thanks, Mauricio. Is that Harney County event going to be a virtual event?
Yes.
Wow. My wife is the co-chair of the Winter Wings Festival in Klamath Falls. I need to talk to her about that because they just canceled it this year.
So it's sort of like in a standing by situation. We're planning of doing a virtual with the possibility of some presential aspects to it. But in the end, it's going to be living online no matter what. So you're more than, once it's finished, you're more than welcome to go and check it out. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a mystery, choose your own adventure mystery. So, well,
I'm going to tell her about that. She may contact you about it. Hey, Jane, how you doing?
I'm okay. I hurt my back earlier this week, so I'm going to try to hang in there and sit in my chair and do this. You see a change of scenery, I may go in the other room and lie down and talk. But things are good. I've been very distracted so far because the feeders outside my window are busy as usual. And I just saw an orange crowned warbler, and there's been a bunch of bush tits on the suet and a hairy woodpecker. And Mark, I know you will appreciate this, having lived on the island in the past, but we've had a flock of 6 western bluebirds that have been hanging out near our barn, and we used to never see bluebirds on the island. So we're hoping they will stick around and nest, but they may just be coming through. So that's good for me.
Well, thanks, Jane. I hope your back feels better. Get up and walk around. That'll help. Hey,
Yeah.
Kaylin, what's happening?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. I always love hearing folks' reflections. It's just a really great way to start the meeting and check in, not having had the chance to meet in person yet. I have felt for a little while like you're kind of speeding down a highway and you see one of those signs that says sharp turn ahead, but I hadn't quite entered the curve. And I think I entered that curve driving slightly too fast and started feeling some of the G forces and realized I needed to slow down a little bit. And so that's what I've been trying to do. Practicing some of the same stuff, like being grateful for day-to-day things and getting exercise in nature. But it does feel like we're in the curve now. To me, it feels like we're in that sharp curve, heading in a new direction, and that's really, really positive. On the personal front, my family, I welcomed a brand new niece, River, yesterday, and that's always a wonderful thing. Really, really happy. I obviously haven't met her yet, but that's great. And there's also a school that I'm on the board of directors for that recently completed a land acquisition of a riverside property. This is back in Idaho. That will both allow us to expand our programming and place it in a conservation easement, most likely, and sort of avoid development of a subdivision adjacent to this experiential education school. So that was a great win in kind of my personal life as well. And then it has been a really busy start to the year between fire recovery, and I unfortunately will have to jump off at 11 to lead a weekly interagency recreation call around fire recovery. But we are working really hard to put together an interagency map that shows all of the impacted fire areas and recreation sites to help better communicate to the public open closed status of various areas and continue to share messaging about responsible recreation, the importance both for habitat reasons and personal safety reasons of staying out of closed areas. So fire has been my big learning thing over the last couple months and really taken over a lot of my time. And then continuing to work on recreation site planning and stakeholder engagement around Klamath Dam removal and some good momentum there. but between Travel Oregon, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Office of Outdoor Rec, this month or last month, January, we released a statewide outdoor recreation economy report. So we now know in every county and every legislative district how much outdoor recreation contributes in terms of jobs and spending, which is a great baseline. And then staying busy with the legislative session, as well as some rulemaking to form an advisory council to the Office of Outdoor Rec, among other priorities. And getting out in the snow when I can. Yeah.
Kaylin, thanks for that. That's a great metaphor, the curve that you described. And I think we're all feeling that very thing. It does seem we're heading in a new direction. From my own perspective, I'll say I'm extremely fortunate in that I was able to get the vaccine. I still teach at our local residency, and that qualified me to receive that. And I'm happy to report that on my second dose, I got really sick, which is good. That means I reacted and I likely have a ton of antibodies. So that's really encouraging. And again, on a local level here, I'm volunteering around, and I vaccinated 100 school teachers last week. And next week, we're going to vaccinate 1,000 Klamath tribal members. And so that's a real deal. That's a really positive thing. It's happening, it's effective, and I'm really happy about that. Now I just need to get my wife vaccinated. The other great thing I got to say for all you birders, we have a barley field near our house that finally, with such a dry year, it finally flooded. We've got 10,000 ducks, geese, and swans piling into that barley field, fueling up for their migration north. Is a truly spectacular scene. Right just now, a bald eagle just flew by my window going out there to try to find a sick one. So it's really impressive. So there's good things going on here in the middle of the winter. And again, I'm very appreciative of all the work that you all have done to get us where we are. As someone pointed out earlier, this is really important work, and it's very gratifying to be involved in it. So with that, I think I'll ask Davia to go through so she can review the attendees and let us know who's out there. Because this is unlike the previous ones. I don't believe we can visualize or see the attendees.
Right, so this is our first meeting on Zoom here, which has the ability to have panelists, which is all of us, and attendees. And so we've got 3 attendees with us, and attendees, you can't turn on your cameras or your microphones right now, but we have the ability to do so if you need to raise your hand, and we'll come to you for the public comment for sure. So I see Kay Brown and Ken McCall are with us. Thank you. We also have a phone number with us. And I'm not sure, Michelle, if we can bring the phone number person over for them to identify themselves, or can they chat?
I think that well, let's pull them over to a panelist. I think.
And Michelle is our handy dandy background Zoom function person. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for your word, Michelle.
Okay, so they've been moved to being able to talk. So can you, I believe it's *6 that you need to push on your keypad to unmute your phone. There we go. Looks like.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks guys. My name is Tyler Dungan. I'm with the Oregon Hunters Association.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Tyler. Okay, Mr. Chair, that's who is present.
Okay, well, great. So let's move on and get some things done here. First off, Davia, thank you for sending out such a nice packet this morning with all of the different things we needed in it. And that included the minutes. So could we get a motion and a second regarding our minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Wait a second.
Great. So we have a motion and a second on the minutes. Is there any discussion about them? Does anybody have any corrections? If not, can everyone give a thumbs up on approval? All right, good. Got that done. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is an update on our grant approvals. As we emailed to you all, we presented this to the commission. And at that time, as you recall, we had enough money for 6.5 projects, which ended up right at the meeting, we definitely had enough for 7. So we presented that and they accepted all 7 of those projects. And then we talked about our 22 contingent projects based on funding. And we were a little bit concerned on how they would react to that, but they thought it was a great idea. We're very much in favor of that process and approved all 22 as the funding becomes available. So we got a lot of positive feedback. I think the commission is quite pleased with the direction we're going. And Davia, do you have anything to add on our meeting?
With the commission, no. I think one of the things I wanted to add is that within a few days of the commission approval, we were actually able to fund the first 2 projects on the contingent list, which was the Harney Soil and Water Conservation District project and the Club Aves project from Verde.
Great. So how about Mark Labhart? Do you have anything to comment on that committee?
Nope, I think you covered it, Carl. Strong support. Just need to, I think there's a lot of, we need to raise the money so we can get the rest of the projects funded, and we need to get the match from the legislature. So that's kind of where I'm pushing for this. So those projects were, I think, if I can speak for the commission, which I can't, but I'll speak for myself. I think the homework that you did and the amount of effort that you put into reviewing the applications, and there was talk about, well, there's 65 or so applications, and these are the top ones. So once we get these all funded and out the door, we can start doing some more and get a lot of these projects on the ground and get the dollars on the ground. I think from my perspective, I'm just very impressed how fast this thing is moving and how we raise the money, we spend the money. We don't let it sit there. We get projects on the ground and get good work done on the ground. So that's a real positive.
Thanks, Mark. And we've been meeting with legislators, and that message has resonated with them, that we can say that. We say in this time of COVID, we're putting money on the ground and moving forward, and that's been resonating. Speaking, now that's a good segue into our next topic. And Davia, do you want to give a little bit of an update on the legislative session?
Hey, Carl, I just wanted to say Mark Stern has his hand raised. I think that is what Michelle was saying.
Mark?
I was just going to chime in and certainly second what Mark Labhart shared there, but also in listening to the presentation, I thought, Davia, you and Carl both did a great job of explaining, presenting, and it was obviously really well received. So kudos to both of you for that effort there. Well done.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. So it's Davia and I have been meeting with some legislators and talking with them, and there's a lot of exciting things going on. So Davia, can you give us an update on the legislative stuff?
Sure. So I made a little slide to help us. That's always fun. So the legislative session kicked off the last week of January, and it's a little bit different this time around because it's mostly happening virtually. So that's a lot different. We're used to going and meeting with a legislator and handing them a piece of paper that says, here's our great idea, so they have it for later. And so having virtual meetings is a little different. But I just wanted to start from what the bills are that are in consideration by the legislature. So there's 4 bills that make reference to the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. All of them in some way are seeking to either remove the sunset date that ends the program in June of this year, or extend it to give us more time for the program. And they're seeking to either restore the general fund commitment to the program, match what we've raised, or create a different fund source for the program. So these are the 4 pieces of legislation. They've all been assigned to the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, which is under Representative Witt is the chair of that committee. So I'll just quickly go through each one, let you know what they are. So the first is House Bill 2600, which was introduced by Representative Helm with a cohort of other co-sponsors. And this bill removes the sunset from the OCRF program and allocates a portion of an existing state transient lodging tax to the OCRF. And the intent of the legislation is for that to be approximately $1 million per biennium. So in some way seeking to replace the general fund commitment with this dedicated fund source. House Bill 2913 removes the sunset from the OCRF program and restores the $1 million of general fund. And the way this one is structured, and the other that does the same thing, is to essentially put $1 million general fund special appropriation back out there and allow the department to access it as match for private funds raised. So should this particular bill pass in July, we would be able to directly ask for $270,000 right away because we've raised that amount. And then it would give us the rest of the biennium to match the remaining portion of that $1 million. House Bill 2171 does the same thing. It also includes a line that requires the department to consult with the Office of Outdoor Recreation on the program, which is Kalen. So we kind of already do that by regulation, but it would put it into statute. And that's part of a much broader, what we're calling outdoor recreation omnibus bill that it has a big role for Kalen's program, growing his program, but also references the Conservation Recreation Fund. And the final bill is House Bill 2066, which delays the sunset to the end of the next biennium. So it gives us 2 more years for the program. So those are the bills that are in the legislature right now. None have had a hearing yet. And what Carl and I have been doing is meeting with members of the Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee to provide information to them about what the OCRF program is and what the advisory committee has done to date, so that when they do see any of the above bills, they know what the program is and they have that background in it. So that's kind of where we're at with that. We have a few more months left in the legislature, but there is a date in March by which, if a bill does not have a hearing, it's considered dead. And so between now and mid-March or so is when we'll be needing to get these bills moving. And then one important note for you all, if you haven't engaged with the legislature before, we're not necessarily asking you to, but if you do want to, just keep in mind that you were appointed by the governor to this advisory committee. And as such, when you're speaking in your role as an advisory committee member, you're representing the executive branch in a conversation with the legislative branch. And so being clear about you can support the governor's recreation bill, of course, and ODFW's bill, but in a lot of ways, we're asking you to provide information rather than advocate. But in your role as a private citizen, you're able and welcome to say whatever is important to you in those conversations.
Does anybody have any questions for Davia about the legislative process and the bills?
Looks like Kalen has his hand raised.
Yeah, and thanks for that overview, Davia. And I know that there's a lot of moving pieces. It's not a question. I just wanted to add briefly one other element of House Bill 2171 that might be relevant to the committee. Essentially directs us to develop a single online storefront for various recreation passes and permits, which might help in the voluntary fundraising efforts down the line. Right, so that we've talked a lot about how do we capture the interest of, for example, the boating public, or folks buying snow park passes, or folks buying state park passes. Well, if that bill were to pass, state agencies are directed to work together to essentially streamline that online purchasing process, which would open up the opportunity to have perhaps a broader pool of voluntary contributions. That was all I wanted to add.
Kaylin, that's a really big deal. I wasn't aware of that. And I think that's really powerful. So I don't know if there's anything we can do. I mean, that might even be something worth us adding to our discussions, Davia, when we talk to legislators, because as we have learned, the lion's share of our money has been coming through that ODF&W site. And if we could replicate that across the park system and the boating and all of that, it could really be powerful. So that's great news. Thanks for reporting on that. I have another, Davia, there was also at some point some talk about some funding for outdoor equity being routed through our fund. And are you aware of any movement on that, if that is part of the governor's bill or not? Do you have any sense of that, Davia?
I'm not, and maybe Caitlin is, so it looks like you are.
Yeah, so the dollars that you're speaking about, Carl, I think might be in reference to an additional $500,000 in the governor's budget that would be directed to the Office of Outdoor Recreation to essentially bolster efforts around equity inclusion in the outdoors. And that lives in OPRD, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department's budget, rather than the policy bills that Davia just had the slide up about. And OPRD's budget will be heard next week, actually, on the 8th and the 10th. And so at this point, anything more that I could say about that would be conjecture. But yes, there is the possibility that more money around the topic of outdoor equity is coming into this space. Exactly how we best make use of it could look like additional staff, plus some supplemental grant program dollars, although those details haven't been ironed out yet, and the budget hasn't yet been heard, but that is in the governor's budget for the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, which the office is part of.
Well, Kaylin, since you obviously are aware of that and involved in it, I would indicate to you that I believe our committee is well positioned, given our connections that we've made with the players in that space, that we could be very effective at helping to deploy those funds. And I just ask you to keep that in mind as all that's moving forward. I think that would be a very appropriate thing for us to get involved with. So just keep that in mind.
Understood. And I just have to make clear that pending legislative direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how things are going. I think there was a question out there about the hearings and when they would be scheduled. Mark, you were asking about that?
Yeah, I was just curious, just so where we think they might be in the queue and when they might come up and what sort of advance notice we might have of the hearings if and when they get scheduled.
So right now, the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee is less than a week notice for the hearings right now. So I think the meetings are Monday and Wednesdays, and I'm not sure there's a full agenda out for Monday yet. And so it is somewhat short notice on that front. There is an opportunity to reach out to the leadership of the Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, which is Representative Witt, Representative Breeze Iverson, and Representative Hudson, to ask them to hear these bills.
Davia, is it appropriate for committee members, given the constraint, there are some constraints on what we're able to do, if they have a relationship with a legislator or know their local legislator, is it appropriate for them, for us to communicate with them or talk to them about the OCRF?
Certainly, you're able to do that.
And just, could you, I think it'd be helpful, just say, clarify that whole thing about us being governor's appointees and what we should and shouldn't do, and if we were going to reach out like that.
Sure thing. So I guess it's important to observe sort of this line of not necessarily asking the legislators to do something explicitly related to a bill, but you can talk about the program, ask for more support for the program in the form of more time, more money. And House Bill 2171, which is the governor's bill, and ODF&W's bill, which is House Bill 2066, we have the free ability to say we support those bills because they came from the executive branch. The two bills from Representative Helm, we can't take a position on those bills since they didn't come from us. They're not our bills. But you have free reign to talk about the fund, talk about why it matters to you, what it can do in your mind. And the real important thing is to not ask them to support those bills that are not our bills. We have no position on those. And I don't know if that was helpful, and I can talk more one-on-one with folks if they have a question about that.
Well, I would encourage all of you to reach out to your legislators and just, I think these guys and women are getting so bombarded that it's important for them just to hear about it. And I get the feeling when Davia and I have our little 15-minute talks with them that we're in a long line. In fact, one of the legislators apologized for the fact that her brain was turning to mush during our discussion. So the more they hear it, the better it is. So if you have an opportunity to reach out, that would be great. Okay, so.
Hey, Davia, I had a quick question on the governor's bill, and I may have misread it, but I thought in the governor's bill, the way the match worked was the department needed to raise the entire 1 million before it could access the match, at least in the way the governor's bill was written.
I might have to take a look back at it because we had provided some new language that I'm not sure ended up in the bill. So I might have to get back to you on that one, Mark. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, the ideal situation would not be the case, and that we could spend the money, we could get the grant or get the match as it arose. But if in fact we still have that requirement of $1 million, I think with some of the discussions we're going to have later on in the meeting, we have a real shot at that sooner rather than later with some of the changes in our fundraising that we're going to discuss. So
yeah, well, and it looks like Mark is correct that the language in House Bill 2171 is the original language that created the OCRF that has the $1 million threshold. And we have worked with the governor's office on amendment language that would make it more like Representative Helm's bill that would allow us to access it as we raise it. But thanks for pointing that out, Mark.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Mark. But we're going to make it work either way. Okay, so one of the things that we have been tasked with, and when I say we, I mean that ends up meaning Davia is tasked with, is to create a report, an annual report for the legislature. And Davia, among all of her other duties, put something together and which she forwarded out to us. So Davia, you want to go through that?
Sorry, I hit share screen and my mute button disappeared. Can you all see the report?
Yes, yeah, it's up there.
Okay, great. So keeping in mind that this is just sort of my design here through Microsoft Word, what we're really looking at right now is the content. And if the committee is comfortable with the content of the report, we'll go forward to actually get it designed. But the concept here is something very brief. So 4 pages is even longer than I wanted, but I think captures the information. So the first page is conceived as just a quick summary, very short fact sheet. Here's what the program is, here's what we had to do, and then here's what we've done. So with the funds raised and the projects funded. The second page is about the campaign itself and how much money has been generated. And I'll update these numbers. Actually, I ran these numbers last week, but I'll keep updating them until we're ready to publish. But we are over 250,000 now.
Davia, that page didn't change, or at least not on my screen. Or did it? I don't think it did. I'm still on, I think, the first page.
Or others? Still on page 1.
Still on page 1 for me.
Oh, my screen sharing is paused. How'd that happen? Okay, do you see it now?
There it is.
Okay, sorry about that. So here's the fundraising page, just a screen grab from the website and a quick summary of funds raised through time. The third page is about the projects. And I'm interested in your feedback. You know, I tried to choose a smattering of projects that kind of show the range geographically, taxonomically, and conservation to recreation spectrum that we've talked about. But if there are projects that aren't on here that you think might be more representative, let me know. And we can go back to those. And then the last page is about the advisory committee and what you guys have done. You had 13 meetings in 2020. This is the 14th. That's pretty impressive, considering they've all been virtual. And just really a very high level, what was accomplished through the operating principles, the expenditure framework, and then the 2 funding rounds. And then I've got a call out for the outdoor equity subcommittee. And so in your review of what's in here, I think I'm really interested to know if there's something you'd really like to, you know, hit higher, highlight more, information that's not necessary to have in here, and any other feedback you have on it. And we can do that right now, but also over email after the meeting when you have time to really look at it.
Other than the fact that this is a really impressive piece of work, does anyone have any specific comments for Davia right now?
I just had a question, Davia. So on the page that you have the projects, it wasn't totally clear to me that there were more projects. I mean, I know you've said there are, but could you somehow say an example or representative projects, or somehow kind of show that this is a subset of what was actually funded?
Excellent.
But yeah, beautiful job.
The only one comment, very simple, you talk about all the things that we were up against at one point and mentioned the Labor Day fires. I would not say just Labor Day fires. it was burning the whole time. I would say the fall and the summer and fall wildfires are it wasn't just Labor Day that we had to deal with. I'd maybe change that. You could also add insane presidential election as one of the things we had to cope with.
Okay, other thoughts?
I mean, I think it's impressive. Nicely done.
Yeah, I want to echo what others have said, that it's a really impressive work. And I wonder if, Davi, you think it's appropriate to include a bit of next steps, path forward, anything like that at the very closing, so that as a reader is reviewing this, you get the history, you get examples, you understand the committee, and then it's not, explicit, advocacy, but just sort of, at least to me, closing the narrative that, we're in a really good position to move forward and something along those lines. I know that's fairly inarticulate, but, a nudge towards the future.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jane, and I totally agree with that. I think that would be a good thing to include, because it, among other things, it's a little plug for where we're going with it.
I'm wondering, Davia, and I was starting to think about where it could fit, or if it would fit. So we've talked about how the fund has made it possible for organizations working in spaces like outreach that wouldn't otherwise be able to get funding, and how it complements some of the gaps that ODFW has. And so I'm wondering if there would be a place, perhaps even close to the end, in which we say how our existence has also opened opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there. Mm-hmm. And potentially also notch ODFW in a direction of finding creative solutions to address some of the gaps that the department has faced, which ultimately made the generation of the fund necessary. Or, so.
Mauricio, I think that's a really good point. And because it's not just for the department, there's some gaps statewide, and we have some great funding opportunities through OWEB, but there are things they don't fund, and we are helping fill that gap. So I think as part of that, as Kaylin's great idea about our future, what we're going to do, that's part of it. We're filling a gap that is there. And we can also articulate, Davia, and I saw that you did mention it, but it'd be a good time at the end to reiterate the tremendous need that we experienced. And we had $500,000 in ask. And the reality is there was only $500,000 because we limited it to $10,000. If we had had no limit, we would have had millions of dollars of ask. And so somehow articulating that incredible need in that ending section that Kaylin suggested, I think would be helpful. So those are really good ideas, and thank you for that. Anything else? I don't see any other questions or comments. Well, great. Okay, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good and bad. I'm in our next section. I have someone joining us who may not be able to get with us for a little while, but we'll figure that out. We'll just move ahead. And so the next item on the agenda is about fundraising. And maybe at this point, Davia, I think so that we can get Kelly on here a little bit later, maybe this is a good point for you to go over just where we are, what we funded, what's happening with our current projects as we're moving down the list, and just put some, if you have those numbers, again, to put those up so everyone can see where we stand right now.
So here's our current dollar amounts. So you'll see 273,118. And that includes a recent commitment from Sustainable Northwest of $25,000 that Mark Stern has been working really hard on. And that's for the Holton Creek RNA project. That's on our list of contingent projects. So I've been working with Dylan Cruz this week on bringing that money in the door. Actual funds in the door are just right at 250,000. So in terms of commitments that we've made to spend those dollars, we're just over 250,000, including the Holton Creek RNA project that we're working on the restricted gift for, which leaves us right now with $21,000 or so. And I just ran these numbers this morning, which means we should be able to get to projects number 3 and 4 on the contingent list, which is great. In terms of how we're doing on the projects themselves, we have a draft grant agreement that will be going out to the 9 projects and maybe 11 if I can move fast enough to get those next 2 funded in the next few weeks. So that money has not gone out the door yet. We're still working on that part. And that's where we're at.
I think one of the takeaways from that is, again, at the time we made the decision to fund these projects, we were at 6.5. We were 6.5 projects, and now we're at 11. So we've nearly doubled the number of projects. And there's another $5,600 coming in from the Wildlife Society. Apparently the check is in the proverbial mail. So there's another 5,000. And that is, my understanding is their intention is to match at least that. So there's another project that we are going to be able to fund. And so I think that our decision at that time to proceed like we did was a good one. I think there's, with Holton Creek, there's opportunities to go out there and raise money specifically for those projects. And I know right here in Klamath, we may have an opportunity to get some money specifically for that Chinook salmon tag study, which is going to be critical for the reintroduction of Chinook salmon to the Klamath Basin, which to me is one of the more exciting projects we could possibly have in the state. So all of you out there knowing some of these projects better than others, and keep that in mind, like Mark has done and was able to get a really significant contribution for us. And so if there's any way that you all can assist in that, like Marette has done with the projects in her neck of the woods, and Jane has done, if we could all kind of work together on getting money in the door so we can get these projects going. One of the things I think I found, maybe I mentioned this already, but resonated with the legislators is the fact that we're getting this money out the door and on the ground quickly in this time that it's really needed. And so I think that's a really positive aspect of what we're doing. So the fundraising has been great. I think we can all agree that given all the barriers that we had, we've done very well, but we're still less than a third of the way to our goal of $1 million. So given that, I think I outlined to all of you in our phone discussions and in the note I sent out about an opportunity that we have to kind of tailor the way we allocate our match that could be very incentivizing for large donors to give to the OCRF. And this has arisen out of several conversations that I've had and that some of the other members have had with entities that are interested in doing things like that. They all like the match, that is just the fact that it's more money into the space, but not specifically to a given project. But what I found is there's many donors out there that are really attracted to the idea that if their money could be matched in a more specific way, particularly back to the project that they are interested in, then they're really incentivized to give, because that leverages their money, and not just in a sort of a nebulous way, and that, yeah, we're going to spend that match in the space. It's more specific to that project. So that led us to start exploring different ways to take advantage of that match that the legislature set up. And of course, in all of these discussions, there's the caveat that we may not get the match. I think the legislature can make whatever decision they make. And every time we've ever talked to anyone about this, we say, look, we're feeling pretty good about it. We've got these bills before the legislature, but we might not get it. And people are very understanding about that. And so you all got that outline that I sent, and I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts about that process. What we need to do, our intention today is discuss that process and the framework for that, come to an agreement if we can that we want to go forward with that. By coming to that agreement, that allows us to actually start to act on some of these potential donors and projects that are out there. But we would intend to formalize this between now and our next meeting, and then have a more formal adoption of the rules of this framework, and not try to hammer that out in this meeting, but rather just get a general consensus that this is the direction we want to go or not. And so that's what this is mostly about, is a discussion in that regard. And I have invited Kelly Beamer, who, as many of you know, is the director of the Coalition of Oregon Land Trust. She's a really dynamic individual and has done tremendous amounts of work for the state and for land trusts, and she has been a big part of the discussions that we've had. I don't believe she has signed on yet. She's in the middle of another meeting, but at some point I'm going to ask her to join us and give us her perspective on how she works with donors with large sums of money going to land acquisitions. And she is going to give us a little later on her thoughts on that. So to start, I just would like to open that up to the committee members, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about that concept and how we might proceed down that road. Okay, so I guess everyone loves it, and we will just move on from there.
I'll say, Carl, that to me is kind of a no-brainer, to be honest. I think it's sort of like basic math, and if we see that there's a project coming our way that, and when we establish that it does align with our mandate, that it does align with the Oregon Conservation Strategy, and if they say, if you tell me that we route $100,000 through OCRF, we may have access to additional funding, and then the remaining of it goes to wherever you see those funds fit best if the match does in fact happen. And to a certain degree, it's a risk that they're willing to take. That makes perfect sense for us to reach our goal, because that is just multiplying the ability of those dollars to do more good in projects and intentions that we've already set forth for our committee. So to me, that was an easy yes.
Thank you, Mauricio.
This is Jane, and I completely agree. I think this is the opportunity we really need to make sure we're going to raise that match. And I've thought about this with several projects. that this would just be a really powerful way to raise more money. So this is great.
Well,
This is
good.
Chris. Oh, sorry, Carl. I was just gonna echo what both Jane and Mauricio is saying. You know where I stand on this, and I think it's a fantastic idea, and brought some projects that would also benefit from it. So it's I love it.
Well, thank you for that, Chris. That's very important to me. I'm glad you guys were able to think about it. You all brought up some great points about the nuances of it. I tried to list those out. I think unless that gives me a sense that we have a general consensus that people agree with this process. The specifics of it, I'll start with one, and that is the size of the match that we would consider. And this is just based on discussions with donors themselves. And the number that seemed to really resonate was 30%. 30% starts to be real money. And in fact, on a specific project, which I won't go into the details of, with 30% and with the donors we're already talking with, that gets that very large project. It's one of our already existing projects. That gets them absolutely to the finish line. It's like a perfect match with that 30%. So, and that seemed to be, if it was less than that, it couldn't generate quite as much interest. And if it was more than that, it was less money for us to use our own discretion on where that money went. And so that's where that 30% came from. So one of the things I'd like to I think we've got a general consensus that the concept is good. And I'd like to hear about that, if there's any pushback on that number, or if that seems to be an acceptable number for everybody.
Carl, can you explain that 30% a little bit more? Give us an example of that. I'm not sure I'm clear.
Sure.
30% of the total project cost?
Well, here, that's 30% of the donation. So again, I won't be specific because, nothing has been, oh, Davia, that is so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if it's beautiful, but I was just trying to make
Well, I'm still confused looking at it, but anyway, I'll try to explain it. So the way this is set up, again, without being to a specific project, but let's say one of our projects that we have agreed to give $10,000, but the total cost of that project is $160,000. That's what they need to get to the finish line. So we've given our 10,000, which they appreciated, and that's all great. But there are some donors that are out there that have expressed interest in potentially donating to that particular project. We can approach those donors and say, look, we really like for you to give to this project. If you were to give this to us, and to make it simple, let's say it's one person. If you could donate, and this is not, I'm not talking out of school. If you could donate $120,000 to this project, we've already dedicated $10,000. So that's $130,000. Well, they actually need 160. Well, we would match 30% of that $100,000 that came to the OCRF, or 120,000. And that would be when we got the match. And of course, this is all contingent on us actually getting through the legislature and getting the match. We would take 30% of that match and direct it specifically to that project. That would leave 70% for us to distribute to any other project at our discretion. Now the reason that's attractive is that's $120,000 that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So that means 70, let's just make it $100,000. It's just easier. That would mean $30,000 of the match goes to that specific project. And then we have $70,000 to spend at our discretion of match. And again, and I've all in my conversations with all of these donors, it has been, and we might not get the match. And as far as they're concerned, it's a risk, but there's not really a risk because the money still is going to go to the project they want it to go to. The match just won't be with it. If the legislature decides not to give us the match, but if they do, and we have a lot of indication that that is their intention, then we'll just be bringing more money to the table all the way around. So that's a long ways to describe what I was just discussing. And here is Davia's visual here that shows how that goes.
So my question is, if they've been, the organization's been doing fundraising and that 30% match would put them over what they needed, is there a way to deal with that? Would they get it anyway, or would it go to a different project, or how does that work?
I think so, because one of the things that happens is they have the amount. I think all those things can be addressed as we move forward. A lot of them they say in the project, we need $160,000 and we're asking you for 10. And when we present that to the commission, we're saying we will fund these projects up to the amount that they have asked for. And so, we wouldn't be giving them money beyond what their ask is unless they can demonstrate that that's needed. So that's a great question, Jane, but I think we can really deal with that as on a case-by-case deal. And in fact, Jane, that brings up another point that we need to talk about. And I think we are going to do this on a case-by-case basis. And we don't want to make this so onerous that we can't keep track of it all. I don't think we can say, okay, if you give us $100 and we're going to give $30 to that project. That's just too onerous to track. I think one of the other questions we have to answer is, what is the minimum donation that we're willing to deal with the cumbersome nature of that, to keep track of it, to make it worthwhile? And that's where I asked Davia to think about that, as she's the one that has to do all the budgeting and talk to the budget office and write the checks and write the contracts. And in discussions with Davia and also some of our donors, we're kind of around $20,000 as our minimum. Just because, in part because we're working on one that happens to be $20,000. And that's big enough to be meaningful and not so small that it's just too much trouble for it to be worth. So again, each of these is going to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And it doesn't mean they may say, well, we don't need your match. Go ahead and spend that all in the general discretionary part. That may be part of the process, but we would have the ability to match them 30%. Does that answer your question, Jane?
It does.
Great. Yeah. So that's another question then is, and Davia, this is, I think, again, as much for you as anybody. Does that 20,000 make sense to everyone?
I guess, Carl, I'm just thinking out loud, and it seems to me that if most of our projects are at the requested $10,000, so if some private donor came forward and said, I want to fund this project for $10,000, that seems pretty clean. So, but yet if you have a $20,000 minimum, that doesn't fly there. So again, I would defer to Davia too, in terms of, you're the one that's got to manage this process, but that's, I guess, my first reaction to it.
That's kind of how I was seeing it too, Mark. I'm thinking if we look back at that residual, let's say 70%, if that residual 70% just about reaches the 10,000 mark that we've been set as our, uh, you know, somewhere where so I see two really lines that we need to balance, right? So there's the one of the inconvenience of the process when you have to, that you, Davia, need to deal with, what makes it worth it, and two, the risk versus reward of the potential donor. At what point taking a chance on the contingency of whether the legislation comes through with a match or not is worth to them to funnel their funding through us. And so from that perspective, I think 30% seems very reasonable. And in terms of the minimum, between 20 to 25 at least should be the what I imagine would make it worth it, because that means that that residual would get us closer to fund one more project. So that's sort of kind of like the math that I've been working on.
I think Mark has a good point there. If someone came to us and said, I want to fund the entire project with $10,000, would you match it? I think we'd have to look at that. You know, I mean, that might happen. I think where the problem is, if we go, well, I want to give $500 to this project, will you match that? That's what's not going to work. And so if we have someone that wants to fund an entire project, I think we might consider that. And I'm even thinking of the Crawdad project, which is $3,800. If someone came and said, we want to give $3,800 to that project, I don't think it's unreasonable to match that. But it's just the cumbersomeness of doing smaller than the whole project and keeping track of it. So that it might be, and I have to thank Mark for bringing this up to me earlier on, because it allowed me to think about it. And that if someone comes to, we can say that we have this minimum of $20,000, which is the number that Davia, I think, was most comfortable with, unless they want to fund the whole project. And then we can consider that. Because I'm thinking we might be able to find someone that wants to give us $3,800 for that Crawdad project, which I really want to see happen. And that's a way to help us raise money. So I don't think that, and that's not that cumbersome. Davia, what do you think of that?
It sounded like Jane might have had a comment, and then I can respond.
That's okay. You can go first.
My initial reaction to that is, if someone wants to fund a whole project, what are we going to do with the 30% that comes in? And so it is that still this program, I guess, is the question, the matching program.
Well, again, Davia, as you know, most of these projects need more than the amount, you know.
Right. And then I think when you're at 3,800, is 30% transformative enough to be worth it to a donor? I'm not sure, but I think that's a reasonable framework. My suggestion was somewhere between 10 and 20,000, because kind of what Mauricio was saying, that the 70% of the match in that case would amount to almost a whole project for the committee to direct to whatever is of interest to them. And the volume of donors who are going to be interested at that level of funding is a little bit smaller. So we wouldn't be trying to run the paperwork for a very small amount that would probably cost us more to put together than we would be bringing in. So that was my suggestion, was somewhere between 10 and 20,000 as a minimum.
Well, most of our projects are for 10. And so maybe if that's not, I think you're right. It definitely limits the number of donors you're going to find. But that it seems like if 10 doesn't seem too onerous for you to keep track of, then that maybe is a better number than 20. Does that sound okay for everyone?
And I think functionally, when you set up the program, if a donor comes forward with $10,000 or more, you would say, this program exists, and if you're willing to do this donation, we can provide that 30% match if we get the match. And then if you have a donor who wants to do $5,000 or $3,800, as Carl said, that can be a conversation with the committee and can be decided case by case. And so in some ways, setting that lower limit is not saying that you won't do it for smaller projects, but it is sort of setting up the pathway for projects that large. So it's not excluding the smaller ones. It's just not making it automatic with the smaller ones.
I think having a lower amount definitely increases the amount of people that would be willing to participate. And then maybe what we can do, so meaning if we set it at 10,000 rather than 20,000, but with the opportunity of having a conversation if something lower than that comes in, at the very least we can start gauging the volume of interest on potential donors and reevaluate, you know, further down the road to say, was it worth it, is it not? But at the very least we're opening the gates as wide as we can, and then see where that happens.
Okay, this is Jane. I agree with what Mauricio just said. It was kind of what I was thinking, is that we put something in place for now, and then we look at it later on and make sure that's what's really working. Because it, in a way, it sort of doesn't matter what we think about it so much as it matters what the agencies think and what the potential donors think. And having had this discussion with an agency and a couple of potential donors, they kind of go a little blank on you when you say, hey, you know, if you put your money to this project through this fund, you know, it could get matched, or it could help support all these other great projects. And I think it just makes it more complicated for them to think about, well, why would I want to do that? And, you know, am I really going to, is this really going to be helpful, and so forth. So I think that it's going to be important for us to have, I know, Carl, that you've had that conversation with some people, and Mark has too, but just talking to potential donors and kind of seeing what their response is as far of whether this is extra work for them to do it that way. I mean, I guess in one case, you know, I could tell that they weren't quite trusting that putting the money through the Conservation Recreation Fund would actually be advantageous to the agency that's doing the project. So it's going to be important for those organizations and agencies to say, yes, this really is a good idea. Please do it this way.
Jane, that's a really good point, because I think that's a fear of a lot of donors. Well, I'm giving this to ODF&W, what are they going to do with the money? But we have that well spelled out that we are able to accept restricted funds, and that means it can only go to that project. It can't, even whether we get the match or not, it has to go, the money that they give to us, if they restrict that, that's the only place it can go. So I think we can reassure them in that way, but that's a really good point. You know, I was hoping that Kelly Beamer was going to be able to join us, but I'm not seeing that happened.
Actually, Kelly is here. I sent her my link for the meeting because it was the fastest option. So she is labeled as Davia Palmieri. There's two of me, and one of them is Kelly. And name the other Davia.
There she is. Hey, Davia.
I'm not worthy. I am, let me just say that right now, of bearing that name, or.
Okay, well, this is
big
Kelly
shoes
Beamer.
to fill.
Let me introduce Kelly Beamer. I think you all, many of you know her, and she has spoken to us before, but Kelly graciously agreed to talk to us, in part just to give us her perspective on how this might be useful in raising large sums of money and attracting donors. So Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with us, and I'll just turn it over to you to give us your insight.
Absolutely. It's really great to see everybody today, and thanks for letting me jump in. I came in right as I was looking at a graphic that was like the ATM of put this money in and get 30%, and that looks really good for conservation. I'm on board with that. No, but seriously, Carl, I know is so passionate. The big picture is that all of the land trust community of Oregon, you know, we represent 22 land trusts and several soil and water conservation districts that are all in the business of protecting land, restoring land, engaging communities. And honestly, they consider the Oregon Conservation Strategy as their North Star, and their work is first and foremost informed by that. So this fund that's created, it's a motivation to all of us to actually secure the state's pledge to invest in conservation. And I just want to express, I want to be a partner in there. I love Carl's enthusiasm and all of you and your dedication. And, you know, just from our perspective, I'm sitting in a place where I feel really lucky to be plugged into so many projects going on around the state to protect land. And I think maybe as Mark know from your time at TNC, land trust, there's a trend that, you know, these nonprofits are looking at larger and larger landscapes and are working on pretty significant capital campaigns. If you look at the 2 projects that OEB funded last year, you know, there were two $2 million grants, and these are for a rainforest reserve on the coast that would connect trails, protect rare species, and connect, you know, Oswald State Park all the way down to or up to Ecola, and just really iconic opportunities. And those tend to galvanize the hearts and minds of many Oregonians. And I watched these capital campaigns secure funding, you know, as little as $25,000 or $25 from a single donor, all the way up to hundreds of thousands and even sometimes $1 million if an individual really wants to provide a legacy. So when I heard about this idea, you know, I just want to, we are in the business of growing the pie for conservation. A match like that among people that really care about their legacy and investing it in land protection and advancing the Oregon Conservation Strategy, and knowing that every dollar they gave to a project could leverage incredible grassroots community working on this, and also, you know, put more to the project, I just want to say is a win-win scenario. And we just did some very light outreach to our community members to say, you know, would you want to be partners in this? And we heard a resounding, you know, yes, a match is very motivating. And the leverage that this fund and the thought and the leadership behind this fund is even more motivating. So I want to give you heart that there are pathways, I think, out there for the private philanthropy community to really engage on a deep level when it is through some of these partnerships. So I know that's pretty high level, but we want to be here to partner. So
Kelly, thank you so much. That was so articulate and so on point of what we're trying to do. And I know that you're so well connected and we can partner on this and really make it go someplace. I think this opens up some fantastic opportunities. So does anyone have any questions for Kelly or comments about what she had to tell us?
I have a question, Kelly. Are there any downsides for you for routing a big donor through this fund?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I still feel like I would really want to get under the hood to understand the mechanism to make sure, you know, when Carl used the word restricted, you know, and I just really want, you really want to make sure you could guarantee that that gift is able to go to where that donor wanted it to go and get the leverage. And if there was risk in that, that could be a huge problem. I think we would just want to have transparency and clarity on that restriction. And, you know, if there was any kind of weird outlying factor where the state somehow, once it went into that fund, had control and it could be diverted, we would want to just make sure it's airtight for that routing, because that's the risk I see. But honestly, people, there's such a strong community of conservation minded. I mean, that's what it's so much about being Oregonian. It's about the places we love. And I think the idea of being able to leverage to really further a gift to go A, statewide potentially, and B, to leverage more funds it's a good thing. But we're still thinking, I mean, I feel like we'd have to really get clarity on the mechanism, how this would happen.
Jane, that was a great question. And I can say that we've already sort of crossed that bridge when we accepted several situations where we had donors give specifically to specific projects, including Pew Charitable Trust, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Those monies were earmarked for specific projects, and it went to those projects. The worst case scenario would be the commission says, oh, we don't like that project, we're not going to approve it. And then the money we wouldn't be able, we'd have to give the money back to whoever gave it to us. And Davia, is that accurate, what I just said?
Yes. And in the restricted gifts that the biggest one that we worked on was $60,000 with Pew Charitable Trusts. And we have an agreement in place between the department and the trust that says the department will take these funds in and then will give them to this particular project. And so there's a contract in place that guides that. And I think one of the things that we need to think about on risk is the timing of how quickly we can move the money. And we were slower than we wanted to be on the Pew donation. But because of that, I think we learned a lot and we can put it in place. But I think Kelly's absolutely right. The mechanism we're going to have for this should be airtight, but also streamlined so we can do it somewhat quickly is the hope.
Yes, I want to speak to that a little bit in that we did get that restricted donation and there was a delay that we did not anticipate. And I'm really sorry that happened, but but that is now happening and going on right now. And we now have templates so that should not be the same deal in the future. So, and with all of these things, the hope here is that we're going to move forward into the next biennium with the sunset removed, and we're fine tuning this for the long haul, not just what's going to happen in the next 6 months. So our goal is that we're just going to keep going. We're going to have this process set up so that we can hit that $1 million threshold in the next biennium. So there'll be some growing pains, but we're getting better at it already. So Kelly, I know you've got a lot going on today, and I really appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much for giving your insight, and we really appreciate that and look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thanks for letting me jump in and for all being champions for this work. It's really important.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're getting through this topic, and the one last thing of a point to make that we need to clarify, and that is we've been talking a lot, and I gave an example of an existing project that we have accepted and vetted. However, to take full advantage of the opportunities out there, I think we're going to have to be able to be open to projects that we have not received applications from, but that we could become aware of and then accept an application from outside of our usual open solicitation. Examples would be land acquisition projects that fit, and of course, all of these projects would have to fit our mandate, be consistent with the Oregon conservation strategy, but we have to be willing to entertain those and be able to accept those outside of our general open solicitation. I think we've all agreed that with the potential for us sundowning or sunsetting in the next 5 months, it doesn't make sense to have another solicitation until we have certainty about where we're going. So what I would like to have us agree to is that, yes, we will entertain projects that are not on our current list that we become aware of, either you all in your own knowledge of exciting projects that are going on, and even if entities bring us projects that might have some large donor funding potential that we can then review and include in this process of trying to maximize our match and our incentive. So the question then before you is if that is something you all would agree to. I did I did get some pushback on that in the sense that it might not be fair to the projects that have sent us proposals already. However, this won't really affect them and how quickly they'll get funded, because this is money that is basically new money that we're bringing to the table. And in fact, if we're successful in getting the match, we'll be using that match to help fund those projects that we've already selected, but haven't yet raised the money for. So that was one area, appropriate area pushback that I got on that. But so why don't I just open that up to you all's comments?
This is Jane again. I sort of feel like time's a wasting on some of these projects. I mean, I know of two $10,000 plus. Oh, sorry. Let's see. Oh, I'm not muted. Okay, you can hear me. I know of two $10,000 plus projects, our donations that are going toward two of the projects on our list. And in both cases, the foundation is somewhat reluctant just because we don't really have this spelled out yet. And I'm thinking that a good next step, if we get this in place today, would be to have something to which we could articulate how this works, and that, you know, no money rubs off in odd ways. And I think Kelly Beamer's Rainforest Reserve project is a really good one, because she's going to be raising a lot of money for that. And if she could really be committed to routing people through our fund, that would be great. So I'm not sure she's not really doing that at this point, because she doesn't have those assurances. And it almost just seems like we need something written up that's really aimed at agencies, and also something that's aimed at donors that explains why this is what you want to do, other than just writing the check directly to the organization. Otherwise, it's just a little bit too loosey-goosey and strange.
Jane, I'm in agreement with that. And in fact, what our intention today was to get an agreement from the committee that this is the direction we want to go. And then we will write up just like our previous framework, we will write up a framework and distribute it to you, a written down framework with Davia's beautiful ATM drawing. And then we can review that and then codify that at our next meeting. But if we're able to, and I know talking to donors, that they're just kind of waiting to see, because I told them, I said, we haven't even really agreed to this yet. But if we are in agreement, then I think we can start moving forward and getting these things to happen, and then have a written codified framework that will assure donors of all the concerns that you and Kelly brought up. And so I think we're on track to do that. And so our purpose today is to get consensus. And it seems to me that we are there. In fact, I'll just enumerate it and see if everyone agrees to that. And what I'm hearing is that, yes, there is support for this concept of providing a 30% match to large donors. In this case, above $10,000 was the number we came to. And that we will entertain outside projects that we become aware of that fit our mandate. Those are if we're all in agreement with those principles, then we can write that up, have it very clear, clarify the restricted nature of these donations, and that we are not going to send it somewhere else. And then we can absolutely vote on that at our next meeting. But in the meantime, I can go to the people I've been talking to and say, look, we're going, this is an agreement. We're just going to get the details in writing next meeting. And I think that timing is good. I think we can use this along with, we can't pull back on our other fundraising efforts. I still want 100,000 Oregonians to give us $10, and we can't pull back on that. And so if we're good with that, then that's direction I think we should head, is just plan on revisiting this next meeting and just like we did with our previous framework.
So Carl, sounds like a really tiny point, but I would make sure that you word it as $10,000 or above rather than over $10,000, because that $10,000 mark is one that donors use a lot. So we don't have to say it. It doesn't have to be $10,000.20.
Well, thank you.
Say 20,000 or above.
That's good insight and good input, and we'll definitely say that. So, okay, well, does anybody have any heartburn with any of that? Anything that we've said? Or are we in pretty much good consensus on that?
Well, I was probably one of the people that pushed back because of the fairness issue, just letting people skip the line. And I understand that if I just was a little nervous about us chasing money instead of really vetting the projects carefully and making sure they were really important. And so I'd like us to figure out how we can really make sure they're vetted and they fit into the priorities, and that we're just not chasing. Somebody goes, oh, I'll give you this money, and we chase it. And I understand if we do chase money and we give it to a project that's not that great, it does provide more money for the other projects and it provides the match. So there is that, and that's, for that reason, I'm okay with it. I just think we need to be cautious about just getting really enthusiastic about accepting every project. And Mark and I have been having a little sidebar here about the Holton RNA, and that was one that I was not enthusiastic about. I used to be an RNA manager, and I just read their thing and I was like, how can they do this? Number one, it's a research natural area ecological reference site, which generally they're supposed to be, the best examples of something that you can use as a reference when you're doing restoration. And so I've written a couple things to Mark and he's responded, but I just want to make sure that this could be something that I know a lot of people would find very controversial, going into a research natural area and logging, making sure that they've dotted the I's in terms of, if they don't have a management plan, they at least need to be coordinating with the research station director and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure Mark is all over this and we can have a private conversation about it later, but I was kind of disappointed because it was on the bottom of the list, and I was really glad because I thought it was a shaky project, and maybe I don't understand it. That's completely probably true. So anyway, just want to make sure we continue vetting everything strongly.
Marat, you bring up two really good points to me. One is I think all of us are in 100% agreement that we have to vet these projects. And we have to do it. We don't want to lose any credibility. We have to vet these rigorously, and we have to turn down projects, even though there's money there that don't fit what we're trying to do. And in fact, what I'm going to suggest, and Marat, since unfortunately you brought it up, I'm going to ask you to be part of this. I think between now and next meeting, we need to also have a framework on exactly how we're going to do that. It's almost like we need a subcommittee to discuss that, because again, we do not want to lose any credibility. We've selected fantastic projects and I'm incredibly proud of them. And I don't want that to change. So I'm going to ask, in fact, what I'm going to just say is I'd like for you, and Mark's done an awful lot, but I'm going to ask him again if he's willing to help us. If you, Marat, and Mark would be willing to help me come up with a framework to vet projects. Are you okay with that, Mark? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to ask you again, but you guys have that expertise in large part from your previous employment. So thank you for that. So we'll bring that as well. Thanks for bringing that up. And there was another important point that dang it, I can't remember what it was. Is there anybody else? And I'm looking at Jane. I know her back's hurting her right now. Is there anyone else that wants to be part of that? Jane.
I don't think I need to be. I trust that, a smaller group may be easier. I mean, if I could be helpful, that would be okay, but I'm happy with it.
Well, thanks, Jane.
yeah, I think there may be some other ways I want to plug in. So
All right, so, okay, I'm feeling like we're there. Davia, is there anything more we need to do to firm that up?
No, that seems pretty good. And Carl, you had sent a list of questions to frame this discussion, so I threw them on a slide, as I do. And maybe just to help us summarize and
Okay, great.
place.
That's great.
Working on bringing those up. Okay, so these are the questions that Carl posed, and I put answers in red. And so I think this last one, this number 5, is the one that this subgroup that the chairs just put together would help consider and help answer. But I think this is the summary as I heard it. Oh, and I forgot to add the language there, Jane, on the $10,000, but that's a really important point that I was thinking about too, that it's equal to or greater than $10,000.
Well, I think we answered all these questions. I believe we got there. And once again, what a great committee we have. All of your comments are so valuable and insight. I really appreciate all that you bring to the table here. I feel really good about this. I feel good about everything that we're doing. And again, we have to be very careful that we keep that going and don't compromise on our principles and what we're all here, what we're all about. So given that, we'll bring this back to you all next meeting. And that brings us to scheduling. I think that's on our agenda. Davia put some things together after our latest doodle poll. So let's move on to that.
Sure. So we did a doodle poll for this year, and today was really the only date that seemed to work for a good number of committee members, which reminded the chair of Mark Stern's proposal late last year that we choose a recurring date of the week. And so the chair and the vice chair were talking last week, and this meeting was on the first Friday of February. And so wanted to throw out the idea of the first Friday of the months going forward through the end of the biennium, which is technically all the committee's authorized for right now. So these would be the first Fridays that I've just thrown up here for your consideration.
Once again, you guys have really stepped to the plate. We've met, as Davia pointed out, 14 times. And this is asking us to meet monthly, but I think it's important because there's a lot of moving pieces right now leading up to the end of the biennium. And in fact, we may find out that we sunset and we're going to have to clean up a lot of things if that's the case. And then if we don't sunset, we got to set the stage for the next level. So I think it's appropriate for us to be meeting on a monthly basis. I'm sorry about the onerous nature of that.
Davia, did we do a doodle poll that did some of this earlier? I thought we did.
We did. Oh, for the days of the week?
No, for future meetings. Was it only for February or was it beyond?
We did it for the biennium, and there was no consistent selection from the doodle poll, which is why we pivoted to the idea of making it recurring. And if you can make it, you can make it. And if you can't make it, you can't make it, because we didn't have great success on the doodle poll.
Okay.
But we can go back if this series of dates is not going to work for a good number of committee members. It's a proposal.
If this is a problem for a large number of people, we could consider another day of the week. Like if Tuesdays are better or Wednesdays are better. But Fridays just seemed like it. I looked at that doodle poll and there were some. Fridays seemed to be fairly good. None of them were great. Any thoughts on that, or do we want to adopt this, or do we want to revisit it?
For what it's worth, it looks great on my calendar. First Friday of every month. And about this time of the day as well.
Yes, and I anticipate these being short meetings like this. And we're ahead of schedule even. I don't think.
I really like the idea of having a recurring meeting date. So not just these, but just put it down for on our calendars as recurring for in perpetuity until we decide we want to do something else.
Well, okay, then it sounds like we're good with this. So that's what we'll go ahead and do. Chris, you can't put a thumbs up, Chris Hager. So is this okay with you?
Works great.
All right, great. All right, thank you. All right, well then, I think that does it as far as our agenda goes, except for public comment. And before that, I'll just say, does any of the committee members have any comments they want to make? Anything, any observations, anything that we want to be thinking about for the future?
It's just going back to kind of the legislative stuff coming up. I'd be interested in engaging and participating. And I think one of the challenges, as Davia, you pointed out, things move really quickly at this point in the session, and they could schedule hearings next week, and you may have 1 day notice or 4 days notice. But I guess it's just a heads up that I think there might be opportunity for some of us to testify in front of some of these committees, and we might need to think about how we're going to organize ourselves to do that a little bit.
So
if I could weigh in, that'd be hugely powerful, Mark. If we could have committee members weigh in at particularly the public comment period, or the public periods when these bills are moving forward. As you well know, it's hugely powerful. So.
And Davia, is there an ODF&W government relations or person tasked to the legislature? Is that you for OCRF? Is it somebody else, or what's the internal coordination with the department?
So Deputy Director Shannon Hearn, who's our deputy over all fish and wildlife programs, becomes the agency's legislative coordinator for legislative session. She has kind of deputized me for the bills related to OCRF, but we'll loop her in on any of the communications we have about it. And I think my guidance on organizing is, as long as there's not a quorum of folks working together on something, it doesn't have to be a public meeting. So a few of you can chat offline about plans for that kind of approach. And one of the things that I'll be doing for sure is as soon as anything gets scheduled, I will send an email out to the whole coalition, including all of you, so you know when that's coming.
So I do have a question, Davia. So as commissioners, we can't testify on a bill that's not supported by the governor unless we testify as a public or as a private citizen, which I plan to do on a couple bills. But does that apply to this committee also? Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to, when you testify, you have to be sure and say, I'm not speaking for the advisory committee. I'm not representing the advisory committee. I'm speaking as a private citizen, but that still carries. You could say I was a member of the advisory committee. So, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. So it carries a huge amount of weight from them to hear from citizens and not just more government officials. So.
And one helpful caveat this time is that if the bill that moves is House Bill 2171, it's the governor's bill. And so we won't have that restriction. But if it is one of Representative Helm's bills, you will have to make that restriction.
Davia, did you have something else, some other business you wanted to discuss?
I had a couple actually that I probably should have put on the agenda, but they've just been on my handy dandy don't forget list for a little while now. But one relates to the legislature and the annual report. Once we have an approved annual report, we'll put together a cover letter from the chair on behalf of the committee. that will get submitted to the House Agricultural and Natural Resource Committee, all the members, and to all the members of the legislature. So that will be an opportunity for us to share the annual report. We're also planning to share the coalition letter that we have in support of the Conservation Recreation Fund. So some of our supporters are working right now to make sure all of the members of the coalition are comfortable with that approach. The other thing I wanted to mention is that right now we're running on private dollars, and we don't have a requirement for match. But thinking in the future, the department right now tracks volunteer hours on a lot of our projects and programs, and we can use that as match on federal grants should the time come when we have federal grants related to this work, which could be through the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. So with that in mind, our volunteer coordinator has put together a little form to make it super easy for you all to just let us know how much time you've spent on committee work, which I know is a lot in the last year. And so I'll send that out after the meeting. And if you have time, I would really appreciate if you could fill that out and let us know what the hours you've put in have been, so we can recognize you for that, as well as put it in our database to know the commitment you put into this. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is our 2 vacant seats on the advisory committee. We've had a couple of applicants for those for quite a few months now, and every few weeks, Carl and I reach out to the governor's office and ask them if they've made any decisions or progress there. And this week, the answer was yes. So we have 2 identified individuals that the governor is reviewing right now. So we could have new members by the next meeting. So we're still in wait and see mode there, but there's been movement. So I wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. That's my other business.
Davia did mention the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. I don't know, some of you may have gotten an email that you're able to sign on for support of that. And so if you haven't done so, you might try to track that down. Or maybe Davia, could you forward that to the committee members? There's an easy way to express your support for that act, which would really be a powerful thing for us, for the department and for the state. So if there's any way you can sign on, that would be great. Well, I think that's all I had. It looks like we have 1 attendee, and I'm assuming that he's got talking permitted on next to his name. So that must mean he wants to make a public comment. Is there anything else, Davia, or are we good?
We also have Ken McCall and Kay Brown, who have been moved into the panelist room if they want to make public comment. So there's 3 members of the public still with us.
Okay, and are they, do we know who wants to make a public comment?
Ken turned on his camera, so we'll start with him. And Kay and Tyler, let me know if you want to make a comment as well.
Okay, great. So Ken then.
Hi, everybody. It's great to sit in and listen to all of these cogitations about various ideas and money. I know you've been pretty quiet about mentioning any specific projects as you went through here, but I'm going to put a big smile on my face and add number 6 to Carl's list of questions that you just went through. And number 6 is, can we make that 30% match retroactive to the Pew dollars you talked about on a particular project I didn't mention the name of? I'll leave you to cogitate on that, Carl. I just said big smile on my face.
Thank you.
You know, that one did come up. That was very much, and that's really kind of part of what I wanted to make a comment or two about, not specific to your 30%, but specific to that project and working with those restricted funds. I'd really like to thank Davia for her patience working through the kind of issues that we had with pulling in larger contributions like that into your funding process here and being able to make those restricted and directed to a project. So Davia still seems to have a smile on her face when she sees me, even after the constant nagging over a fairly long period of time about getting that template in place. So we're extremely happy to have that. Davia tells me essentially the check is in the mail. I've talked with our partners over at ODOT and ODF&W on that project, Gilchrist, obviously. We are at the point now with that project of going out for a bid for the fencing. When I first talked to this group, and Jim Atkinson was in the conversation too about that specific project, we were at about $700,000 of the roughly $1 million that we needed to make that fencing piece happen. Right now, thanks in no small part to OCRF, we're up there in the 850 bracket, and that was a huge contribution from this group that helped us get there. So that's sending us out for a bid. So thank you, Davia. Hopefully we're still friends for a while. Other thing I wanted to make a comment on was the testimony and the bills that are coming up that have something directly to do with this group, this committee. OHA has a pretty busy legislative schedule. We testify on a lot of things. I personally just testified on some funding options for looking into the future on wildlife passage specific, which was House Bill 2548. Just a couple days ago. It's an easy process if people want to jump in and do some testimony, but my point here is that we will be doing testimony on these OCRF bills, OHA, and whether that's myself, Tyler's on the phone here. He probably most likely will be a person that does that, but we'll be testifying in support of the program here. We're scratching our head on just exactly what it is we have to say, but no, we're here to back you guys up. That's all I had. Thank you.
Ken, thank you. Let me ask you this, Ken. Can you send me some documentation of the shortfall that you have on the Gilchrist project?
Absolutely. I was just puttering around a few minutes ago with the spreadsheet I've got that has those kinds of numbers on it, Carl. Just email that to you.
Yes, send that to me, and actually we'll revisit that. I think I would love to be able to go back to Pew and say, not only did you get more money into this space, but we specifically helped your project. And that's the reason we're doing this. They were so gracious in being willing to donate without that specified match. I think it might be a good thing to go back to them, and maybe we'll get them to give us some more. But in any event, yeah, just send me that documentation and we'll revisit that idea.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I know, speaking for Laurel, who OHA works on the Oregon Ungulate Action Team also with Pew very directly, plus on, passage things in general around the state. But I know stretch is probably not the right word for Pew, but this was a new undertaking to donate directly to this sort of a project for Pew. And that was Laurel that pushed that through. So, we owe her a great deal of thanks, and it's really good that she's able to work through this organization with those restricted funds. So everybody comes out a winner here. So I appreciate it.
That would be a good reason for me to reach out to her and just see how that might be received. Okay,
right,
well,
thank you.
That's a good thought. All right, well, great. Was there anyone else with public comment?
I have not heard from Kay or Tyler that they want to. Now's your moment to come off mute if you do want to make comment.
I kind of stepped on Tyler and took the opportunity to do the OHA comments. Tyler was going to mention also about the testimony for OCRF.
Yeah, folks, this is Tyler. Thanks to Ken for mentioning that for me, but I don't have any further comment.
Well, thanks for joining us, Tyler. Okay, well, I think that that covers it. I'm very happy with how this all went, and we got some exciting opportunities ahead of us. So we will convene that little group here in the near future of Moret and Mark and I, and then we will meet on the first Friday of next month. Okay, well then I would call the meeting adjourned, and it was great seeing all of you all again and hearing what you're up to, and look forward to meeting with you again. All right, see you all later.